And the Ship Sails On happens to be the first film that Fellini had made in a long time without his collaborator Nino Rota, the famous legendary composer, which presents a bit of an irony because the film seems so preoccupied with the theme of music and really examining music and all of its power and mystery over people.
With these very upper-class opera artistes engaging in something that you would see maybe at a circus. Fellini, of course, is almost synonymous with the circus.
Ma quel fa non era lui. Non lo senti che è stonato?
Ma come è stonato? Non senti che per te...
No.
There's a lot of different kinds of sounds working in this film. It's not just opera. So we have, of course, the opera music, and we have these clanging industrial sounds. We have, as we're going to see in the chicken scene, a sort of singing that borders on the hypnotic.
Guardate, ora dorme.
Oh, ma è incredibile! Povero pollo!
Se fate cantare la signora Cuffari!
Grida più forte!
Vogliamo sentire cantare la signora Cuffari!
Aspetta!
Ma è una richiesta insensata! Non la sentireste...
So one of the more audacious elements of the scene is how the room compositionally dwarfs the characters. You have a lot of long shots where the backgrounds and the boiler itself makes the characters look small and puny.
And you do establish this vertical space. The opera singers are looking down and the laborers are looking up, which implies that they have this hierarchical, stature. And yet at the same time, they're obviously in competition with each other. Fellini likes to cut, horizontally. Whereas the boiler room workers they're almost always shown as one continuous group, swaying in unison to the voices and.
There's this sort of great contrast between the high art aesthetic of opera and the sort of ridiculous, hyperbolic caricatures that Fellini gets out of these close-up shots we get of the opera singers doing their damnedest to outdo each other and to win the workers' favor. The singing competition gets more and more intense. Fellini cuts to the different singers in close-up. He gets closer and closer to them, and then finally, in the past, he'd use tracking shots to sort of seek his characters out. Here, he's dividing them.
I would say that this is one of Fellini's most theatrical films, since it's bound within a very, rather limited, setting. It's all in one ship. Okay, so in this sequence, once again, we have, this vertical structuring between the bourgeois opera performers who are upstairs, and then these, Serbian refugees, these rabble who are downstairs. At the same time, it's a reversal from the boiler room scene because, it's the lower classes that are doing the performing and the upper classes who are kind of drawn and captivated by the performance.
And again, this goes back to the idea of spectacle unifying two different groups of people.
Yeah, and there's a great use of shadow in this scene. The Serbians are mostly seen in shadow. You don't make out their faces at all, whereas the people who are on the upper deck, you can pretty much make out each of their faces in detail.
Presento due grandi maestri di danza. Loro vi insegneranno come dovrete ballare.
Danza era per chiamare la pioggia di
But now as this hierarchy collapses, now you get this blend of seeing people in light and in shadow.
come raccogliere l'acqua.
I wonder if Fellini's gaze at the Serbs in this scene is a little more exotic, shrouding
sure.
them in shadow and
More mysterious, more kind of protean in their kind of undistinguished kind of collective mass movements, like so many
blending into each other.
Yeah, exactly. It's very abstract.
Absolutely, yeah. That's interesting. I think that reminds me a lot of how shadowy a lot of the characters are in movies like Satyricon and Casanova, where Fellini's looking at them as some sort of unknowable, mysterious creatures that he can never really be a part of, or he can never really understand as well as maybe the caste he comes from.
One of the paradoxes of his films is that they're considered to be the most, in some ways, most egotistical or ego-driven because their sensibility is so distinguished, and he's sort of the quintessential, auteur artist who imposes his vision on the world. And yet at the same time, some of their greatest moments are these mass, spectacles of crowds of people, these party scenes where everyone's exotic and you're kind of lost in the melee of humanity.
What's interesting is that the hero characters from Fellini's earlier films, for example, the Marcello character in La Dolce Vita, those characters really give way to these sort of ciphers who are really not sure how to feel about, or these very weak sort of like objective, reporters and so on who are totally undermined in terms of their objectivity and are shown to be completely ridiculous. Yeah, there isn't a very strong identification, and that's what makes, I think, his later films actually a little more interesting and a little more risky in that way.
Permesso.
Sembra che stia sempre sul punto di rivelarti un segreto, ma poi